In this section I will describe the rules engine. Here we see on the left hand menu the link for rules engine. At the moment there are no rules created. To create a rule, click on the plus icon on the bottom right. Give it a name, in this case demo rule 1, and a description. The checkbox for active may be on or off. In this case I'm going to turn it on because I want the rule to run. I can optionally deselect it and the rule will not be active then. Click Create, and now the rule is listed. It has been created today, the status is active, and it has no current history yet. This history sparkline bar would indicate how many times the action has fired each day for the last 30 days. I'm going to click on the pencil icon in order to see and edit the details for this rule. This page describes all the pertinent details for a given rule. On the left, we have the generic information about the details and when it was created, etc. Beneath that will be a log of all of the actions when they happened, pertinent for this rule. We see the triggers on the top right and the actions on the bottom right. Currently no triggers or actions have been defined, but we will do that next. If we wanted, we can alter the details we just entered by clicking the pencil icon. This brings up a modal window to edit the rule details where we can change them here and save if we wish. This is especially important if you want to set a rule as active or inactive. Also, you could click the cogs icon to bring up a list of icons to change the rule icon as it appears in the rule listing. At the moment, what I will do now is add a single trigger. I click on the plus add trigger icon, and I am presented with a menu of different trigger types from which to enter. Starting with the first one, a threshold. This is a trigger for when it exceeds a certain value or is below than a certain value. To configure this type of trigger, you give it a name and set the condition. So suppose I was to observe if the CPU was greater than 90. I would click Create and that would set this trigger here. I'm going to click Cancel. And we'll look at other types of triggers. So if I add a trigger of threshold with window, once again you give it a name and we set the condition. Perhaps if the CPU is greater than 90, but in this case we are going to observe it for a time window of 30 seconds. So this means that if the CPU incoming metrics appear to be greater than 90 but only for 20 seconds, then we won't proceed to the actions. I'm going to cancel this trigger so we can look at the other types. Delta threshold. Once again, one gives it a name so that we can refer to the trigger. And in this condition, we look at perhaps if the CPU increases by more than 50 within 5 seconds. This would indicate a sharp rise, for example, in CPU usage, and this comprehends a time window again. But we are observing the change rather than the absolute number of the metric. For a different type of trigger, we can look at events. In this case, we are looking at simply the name of the event. So if an event comes in with the name high CPU, then that will trigger this. For an event with a value, it's slightly more complicated. Give the trigger a name, of course, and if we look for high CPU, but not just if the event arrives, we also require the event to have a key value. So if the CPU entry is greater than 90 and is specified within the event that is sent into the API v1 IoT data endpoint, then this would trigger. For the other type of trigger, we can monitor the availability. So if a device has not reported for more than a number of seconds, for example 100 seconds, then this will trigger. Let's have a look at the various type of actions. So to add an action, we select which type. In this case, an incident report. So this is a Connecthing incident report. What message would we like to set in the incident report? For example, high CPU observed. And we could set a severity of warning. And the last sentence comprehends the throttling of the action. We only want this action to fire a maximum number of times, perhaps a maximum of 5 times in 1,000 seconds. And I would click create here. But let's cancel and see the other types of actions available. We can send an email as an action. We give the action a name. Who is going to send the email? It must come from an account. In this case, we click the drop down and see there is one email account configured. This is done inside the settings administration page separately. Thus, the email account details and credentials such as username and password are hidden from the view here. What is the destination list? You can put more than one email address if you wish. Give the email a name. And then this is the content area of the email. What is the message body, for example? Throttling also occurs here. Perhaps we only want to send one email per 120 seconds. At the bottom right, we see the View Variable Dictionary. I click this, and there's a full description of all of the various swapping codes and swapping functions available. This basically means that when a trigger fires, we can extract some of the data which occurred and place that into the body of the email. For example, we may wish to record when the CPU goes high, but what was the exact value conveyed? And we can get this sort of information by going with the square brackets around a specific value. Of interest is to put compiled rule data in. By putting compiled rule data in here and sending a sample email, we can observe what all of the values are and very quickly find the ones we want. I would click create to set that as an action here. Another type of action is a HTTP push. We can make an API call to somewhere else. So maybe we want to send a post request with a particular message saying test. A JSON message will be sent as part of the post to a specific URL destination. At this point, we could put in a relative URL for a microservice, perhaps at /services/test1 or something like this, whatever the microservice is listening to. Or we could type http:// and then some server/endpoint in order to reach some external servers. Once again, there's throttling, so perhaps we only want to send one of these HTTP posts per 100 seconds. And one would click create here. You can configure a number of actions for each rule, but only one trigger currently.